Greetings, welcome to Hexed Encountered. My name's Joe. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the game Ardennes II. This will be a first look. And this game is from The Gamers, Multi-Man Publishing. This is a standard combat series game, or SCS as it is popularly known. The series itself was created by Dean Essig, and he is actually the designer of this game, which is a remake of an older SCS game from 1993 called Ardennes, as you might expect, based on this one being Ardennes II. And so the key thing with this one is that there was a recent BCS, or Battalion Combat Series game, called the Last Blitzkrieg. And BCS is a slightly more complex, I guess I would say, system than SCS. SCS is meant to be pretty approachable and something that is fairly easy to grasp and play. The BCS game, the Last Blitzkrieg, involved a lot of research and everything, and a lot of that research was used to help update Ardennes into what we have here today, Ardennes II. If we flip the box over and take a look at the back, you can see that this says Ardennes II is a standard combat series SCS game, reissuing the award-winning game Ardennes from 1993 using the additional research available in the BCS game Last Blitzkrieg. Like its predecessor, it covers the German Wacht am Rhein offensive in December 1944 against the heretofore quiet front of the Ardennes forest. While the Germans attempted to reinvigorate its offensive forces in spite of their heavy losses on both the western and eastern fronts and the massive Allied air campaign against its industry using drafts of both the elderly and young, as well as fanatical production efforts, maximizing the use of slave labor and underground factory facilities. The defending U.S. forces were recovering from the exertions of the dash across France and using the area to give exhausted units a chance to refit and get their reinforcements some modest battle zone experience. The result went down in history as the Battle of the Bulge. So you might ask yourself, does the world need yet another Battle of the Bulge game? Apparently it does, and this is actually, in my opinion, going to be a pretty good one. But to continue reading what it says on the back, it says, overcoming the initial surprise, the U.S. forces put together a series of determined defenses, numerous timely bridge destructions, and the incredible power of their well-supplied artillery to stop the vaunted German panzer troops nearly dead in their tracks. Ardennes II covers all this action in turns representing 1 day of combat and a hex scale of 1 mile per hex. Units are usually reinforced battalions or smaller. The full campaign game lasts only 16 turns from the 16th of December to the 31st of December of 44. In addition to spotlighting the better order of battle and map research first used in LB, that's Last Blitzkrieg, the game differs from its predecessor by highlighting the differing nature of the artillery on both sides, correcting the original supply wagon supply system, as well as giving the units the opportunity to withdraw before an enemy attack, and it cuts back on the amount of chrome rules which the player needed to wade through and which exaggerated the effects of some marginal forces. The game continues the SCS tradition of a very clean and easily played sequence of play, clear unit interactions, and straightforward victory determination. This game is highly recommended for those interested in learning for the first time or teaching the fine hobby of wargaming to beginners. This game comes with 7 scenarios, it looks like, one of which is, of course, the full campaign. It is a 2-mapper, and it takes 16 turns, as we just heard, to play the full campaign. The breakthrough campaign is 1 map and 6 turns. Kampfgruppe Piper, part of 1 map, 5 turns. The Goose Egg, part of 1 map, 5 turns. Baston, Screaming Eagles Under Siege, parts of 2 maps and 8 turns. And Tip of the Spear, 1 map, 4 turns. The components are the SCS Rulebook version 1.8, the Ardennes II game-specific rulebook, 560 counters, 2 maps, each 22 by 34 inches, 6 scenarios. It shows a complexity of medium and a solitaire suitability also of medium. As you can see, game designer Dean Essig, series designer Dean Essig, game developer Lee Forrester, map work, or artwork rather, box Kurt Miller and Nicholas Scooby, and counter maps and charts Dean Essig. As I mentioned, Carl Fung did a lot of the research for this based on his work on Last Blitzkrieg. So let's take a look and see what's inside the box. Okay, here we go. All right. So there's kind of a little thank you note here from Multi-Man Publishing, and a note about what should be in the box, and if you have any problems or issues with the game, some contact information to let them know. That's a nice touch. We do have one 6-sided die, really fairly basic, but a die is a die, and it's not like I'm short on dice. All right, we do have the Standard Combat Series Ardennes II rulebook. And this checks in at 20 pages. We do have the terrain effects chart on the back. Here we see scenario information. This is obviously the game-specific one. As far as rules themselves that go beyond just kind of scenario information back here, scenarios start on page 8. So you have 7 pages essentially of rules that are specific to this game. And some of those are actually pretty specific. Things like the way artillery works, the addition of some zone of control type things, almost a ZOC bond kind of system. It actually says ZOC bonds right there, so it does say a ZOC bond exists between 2 zone of control posts, each fulfilling all of these requirements. So basically it's infantry only for this. Plain infantry, any level of motorization, plus mechanized airborne or glider infantry. That's it. No bicycle, penal, Ertz, Ost, machine gun, or pioneers. The 2 ZOC posts must be exactly 2 hexes apart so that the ZOC bond is a single hex. The bond hex cannot contain units of either side, nor can it contain any prohibited terrain. So that's an interesting thing and something new for the series, as far as I know. I do have several other Standard Combat Series games, but none of them have this in it. So, yeah, zones of control. I guess there aren't actually any traditional zones of control. There are some rules that kind of mimic part of what a zone of control would do. But I'm not going to get real heavy into the rules. When I do a playthrough of the game, we'll talk about rule specifics. But as I mentioned, there are a couple things in here. There's these traffic jams that we'll see on the map when I get the maps out. This is an interesting twist as well. You need some way, I guess, or Dean came up with a way to kind of model the logistical issues of trying to push these forces, the Germans I'm speaking of, trying to push the German forces in through, bottlenecks essentially into the Ardennes, because there are only so many roads. It is a forest, even though it was winter, there's a lot of trees, etc. It's not the best area for trying to push mechanized forces and panzers through, obviously. So he came up with this, which automatically makes units DG, which means disorganized, and there's little DG markers in the game to indicate when, and you can actually see it right here, DG, disorganized, if you have not played an SCS game before. And, things like the West Wall, weather, and then you have the barrages. And this is a different thing, too, the way artillery works in this. Typically in a hex encounter war game, artillery impacts units in a hex. In this game, it just affects the hex, and then that effect kind of trickles down to impacting the effectiveness and the movement ability of the units that are going through this barrage area. It's a really clever system. Again, I'm not going to get too deep into rules and so on and so forth, but there are some really interesting twists in this that make this, in my opinion, fairly unique amongst the SCS offerings. Here we have our combat results table. As mentioned on the back of the box, you can actually retreat before combat in most, or at least some cases. There are mandated holds where you have to defend, basically. If you're DG, again, that's disorganized. If you're under an enemy barrage marker, there's an example of the unique artillery system. If you're in a city, if you contain leg units, air supply for artillery, DG effects, barrage marker effects. So these are the effects of the barrages. Okay, so we have 2 of those, 1 for each player. Here's our counter sheet. So that's 1 counter sheet. Is there? Oh, there is another one. Okay. So here, these look like Americans to me. Lots of green. Mean green, army green. So you have a lot of forces here. Again, I'm not going to really go into the specifics of the system. The SCS people who watch this already know all this stuff anyway. And when I do the gameplay video, we'll talk about what all the marks, what all the numbers on the counters mean. So pretty standard counters if you're familiar with multi-man publishing stuff. Here is one of the maps. We'll talk about the map in a bit. Here's the other counter sheet where we have some German forces and the SS, of course, in black. You have some barrage markers. Here are your DG markers, etc. Over here we had some blown bridges. So, and then we have map B, Luxembourg. And here's the other die. It's red. So we have one red, one white. Just wondering where that other die was. And this is the series rules, and this is really thin. 8 pages. 8 whole pages for the series rules. So, as you might guess, since this is the second version of a game that was originally released back in '93, 30 years ago, this is an old system. I don't know if I would say old. Let's say mature. Okay, let's say this is a mature system. Rules version 1.8. That's really not that much over 30 plus years of series development, which shows you that Dean's system was good to begin with, and he's just tweaked it as time has gone on. But yeah, you have basically 8 pages of series rules, and here's your normal zone of control, which isn't really in this particular game, but you can see the way the series works for zones of control in general, and then how terrain impacts it. And again, this doesn't apply to this game, so I don't even know why I'm talking about it. Overruns also work a little differently in this game. There's a lot of unique twists to this game, which is appropriate when you think about the Battle of the Bulge, because of the way the terrain, the weather, all that stuff kind of came together to create a fairly unique situation, at least for the Second World War. And all of those things kind of make for an interesting environment for a war game, which is why there are umpteen thousand Battle of the Bulge games, I suppose. But like I said, I think this one is a good one, and we'll get into that when I do the gameplay. So let's talk about the maps. So the maps are large, and I'm going to set them up, but I'm going to take a second to do that because, like I said, they take up a lot of room, and I'm going to need a bigger boat. No, what I'm going to need is a bigger table. So that's coming up here in a second. Okay, so here we have a look at the map. It is a big one. It is 2 map sheets. Obviously, there are bigger. The Last Blitzkrieg covers 4 maps, and if you do have that game, you'll notice some similarities between the two. Obviously, they cover the same area, the same battle, the same time frame, etc. And as I mentioned earlier, the research for Last Blitzkrieg helped kind of design, or was implemented at the very least, into this game. So I do have a map here, or an image rather, of the map from Last Blitzkrieg, which was posted on Boardgame Geek by Carl Fung. And so you'll see that it's pretty similar, although that one was 4 map sheets. This one is only 2. Scale's a little bit smaller. So some of the items that you might want to take note of here on the map. Obviously, we have Germany along here on the eastern side. And over on the other side, in that direction, we have Belgium. Luxembourg down here. Bastogne is right here. So basically, our start line is along this area right here. And you can see a lot of these yellow hexes with an X in them. Those are the traffic jam hexes. So those will be the hexes where you will have units that enter there will become disorganized to kind of slow down the German advance. That, I think, only takes effect in the first couple of turns. And then after that, the shackles come off, so to speak, and they can advance in a more normal manner. But here you have an idea of the various parts of the map. This is map B. That's map A. Our seam is right here. along this line right here, runs right through Bastogne. We have the turn track on the far left side. You can see on there we have a weather table where you'll roll a d6 and it'll determine whether or not you have freezing or non-freezing conditions. We have an airstrike table for the Americans. Obviously during this battle the weather was not great, which kept American air forces out of the battle for significant pieces, and that was a big deal. The Americans by this time, well, the Allies in general by this time, were enjoying pretty significant air superiority. What German fighters there were basically tied down by the strategic bombing campaign. You also have a bridge blowing table, and you actually have stuff like that over here. Here's a Von der Heide success table area. Again, a bridge blowing table up there on the other side for the second player. You do have a terrain key right on the map, which is always nice, as well as, of course, the turn record, which you can see runs from December 16th with turn 1 all the way through December 31st, turn 16. So that, as they say, is that, my friends. And this has been a look at Ardennes II. At some point, I will try to get a gameplay video of this game up on the channel. I have a bit of a backlog, as you probably have heard me say several times if you've been watching my videos over the past couple months. So it may take a little while, as I do have other things in the pipeline already that I need to kind of continue and get done first. This will go into the queue, so to speak, and will get done at some point in the hopefully not too distant future. So as always, I do appreciate you guys watching. Please consider liking, sharing, and/or subscribing. And definitely, if you have comments to make, please feel free to do so. I will reply to any comments or questions that you might have. Corrections are also always welcome, although I probably won't make too many mistakes, I hope, on what is basically an unboxing video, but who knows? So yeah, that's going to wrap it here. My name's Joe. This has been Hexed Encountered, and until next time, as always, happy gaming.